Okay, welcome everyone. Yet another Unstuck. Hope you're all doing well. We've had some really divergent conversations recently, and we have another divergent one today. I have Gina Pulice with me, and we're going to talk about a variety of things. But what I'm really hoping to explore is the kind of path of a creative and committed creative. We've had some of those conversations before, but I don't think we've ever had, in the years we've been doing this, a performance artist. So Gina, welcome.
Thank you.
Your time, your willingness to be here. So you are a professional juggler, right? That's the performance art.
Yes. And recently I've gotten into juggling fire and fire eating, which is very exciting. Yeah. Haven't done knives yet, but hopefully when I'm 50, I'll start with the knives. No, actually, I was meant to learn juggling. That was a task in I think it was my 4th year of my BFA. I never got it. I tried and tried and tried.
Right.
Well, maybe it's not fair to say I tried and tried and tried. I tried. I couldn't do it. I never got the hang of it.
Yep. Got it. Yeah, no, I used to do old deadhead, right? Used to do those I don't even call them now, the sticks, the juggling. Juggling sticks, I think. No,
devil sticks.
Yeah, I don't know. I was pretty good at them. That's the closest I ever got. See, now that's in my head. As soon as we're done, I'm hitting the internet and seeing if I can actually buy a set of those, because it's been forever since I've had one of those. All right. Anyway, BFA.
Do you play hacky sack too?
No, I couldn't do the hacky sack thing. The subtle subcultures. The hacky sack crew was a very specific thing. And I couldn't. Also for me, team sports, no good. So even something as straightforward as unstructured as hacky sack, it's a team sport, no good. Juggle, individual sport, I'm down. Tennis, we're good. Tennis doubles, nope, not happening.
Wait, how do you play tennis by yourself? Oh, you just mean one-on-one.
One-on-one, right? So even then, I'll tell you, it's not ideal. Martial arts, cool. Yeah.
What do you have against teams?
All right, you want the whole unpacking here?
I do.
Yeah, so
unpacking is my thing.
I had this conversation over. We have a big, what used to be a CrossFit group. They stepped out of the CrossFit brand after that organization had some problems nationally, but they've maintained that workout thing. It's like forever. The years we've been here trying to get me to do CrossFit. I'm like, I appreciate the workouts. I'm willing to do one-on-one version of that. Like I work with a trainer, and so I'm willing to do cool. I'm never coming to your group class. Like, why? I said, here's what happens. Okay. First off, I bet you all have the same t-shirts, right? She goes, well, yeah, you get a t-shirt when you sign up. I said, right there is a red flag for me, right? Because here's what more than 2 people have the same t-shirt or hat or pin. And then so I'm an organizational guy, I think in generations, right? So in a traditional organization, a generation of management is about 3 years. Right? 3 to maybe 5 years is a new generation of management is kind of how you can think about it. A system like that, a generation is 3 to 6 months max. Okay. So you get 2 to 3 generations in, and now the t-shirts and the hats are just like, that's what we do. Right. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere in that 2 to 3 generations in, somebody makes a joke about the spin studio. The guys just sit there. They do the same thing over and over. Yeah, spin studio. You get another couple of 2 or 3 generations in, another 6, 9, 12 months, and spin studio. Freaking guys have 2,000 square feet up there. Can you imagine what we could do with 2,000 square feet? A couple of more generations go in. You go, did you hear that Lyle broke his toe because there isn't enough room to store the airplane tires? And if we had the spin studio, we could store the airplane tires up there. And then you give it 1 or 2 more generations, and you got a couple of dead spin instructors. Right? Like that is the history of the world. That is, as soon as people start wearing the same t-shirt, hat, anything, give it a few generations and somebody's getting hurt. So I'm just opposed to anything. Yeah, that's it. That's my rant. Thank you for attending my dysfunctional TED Talk here.
Yes.
So all of that is to get back to no hacky sack.
I didn't do it either. Mostly because I couldn't.
Yeah.
But I do remember, I miss parking lot culture. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it was fun.
Yeah. I actually want to do parking lot events here. Anyway, we're getting like real. So these things are conversation and super casual, but we're testing the boundaries. So let me go back to you. So you referenced BFA, right? So that was for theater
Acting.
performance, and it's acting and writing, or acting?
No, just acting. It was a BFA in acting from the theater school at DePaul University,
Okay.
which used to be the Goodman School of Drama.
Okay.
So the Goodman School of Drama existed, and then I want to say it was like in the 1960s or 70s, DePaul bought it essentially. And yeah, it's a conservatory. It's a 4-year conservatory for acting. You can get an MFA in directing. You can study scenic design, costume design, all of that good stuff. And it was, very intense in terms of the theater training. In terms of the college degree, not so intense. Conservatories have a reputation for churning out dummies, and I'm no exception. So I did go to grad school after that, but it was to study something equally specific, which was social work. And so really what I'm saying to you, and I went to California public schools. So what I'm really saying to you at the end of the day is I don't know anything.
Got it. Yeah, no, social work is good. You can support all the out of work actors.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. No, my daughter is in what I refer to as singy, dancy, talky school. She dropped out of the conservatory to transfer over, so she was in a BFA musical theater. She's got pipes, and so, but she actually wound up 3 years. She transferred over to the acting and theater program. And one of the things I think she's always appreciated about the program is that she doesn't have to take a whole lot of math and science and other courses because she just doesn't care. She's so focused, like she doesn't care.
It was pretty great, to be honest with you. I mean, I liked the few academic classes that I took, but I preferred preparing for shows and doing scene study and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what what I like to try to do in these conversations is really unpack a path, right? To in part educate, but in part to demystify and humanize, right? It's different now than it was even 10 and certainly 20 and 30 years ago. Choosing to go into the arts, into performing arts, it doesn't seem like as radical. It's still a radical choice in many ways, but it's not nearly as radical a choice as it would have been 30 years ago in terms of the whole, you'll never get a job and practicality and all that stuff. These days, everything's a mess. And so it's like, yeah, may as well study acting, whatever. It's just as stable as finance, but take us back. So I'm assuming you were an actor in high school, right? The whole kind of theater thing.
Always. I went to see a production of The Nutcracker when I was in kindergarten, and I didn't really care about the dancing. I really thought the costumes and the lights and the whole concept of a stage was so intoxicating. Remember in the old days when footlights were actually lights that were on the edge of the stage?
Yeah.
I stared at those footlights. I was so enchanted that by the time, so for Christmas, we had to make one of these crafts, to bring home and draw a wreath. And my wreath had footlights all the way around it. So yeah, I loved it. And I studied, I started doing drama, which I think was available until junior high. Okay. So I started that in 7th grade. And then I did it in high school, and I had like a very typical high school drama program. I mean, it was the English teacher who they made do the plays. And,
right.
She didn't really teach acting. It was more like, learning your lines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as far as going to theater school, I'm a first generation college student. So there was no conversation about college growing up. There was no, I think there was a vague expectation, or not even expectation, just like, well, you'll probably go to college because that's what people do now.
Sure.
But certainly didn't go visit colleges, my parents had nothing to do with my applications, et cetera. In fact, I only applied to one place because I didn't know that there was a different way to do it.
Right.
And I applied to the one place that I received a brochure from.
That's so awesome. That's so great.
And it was wild because it required an audition.
Yeah.
And I lived in Sacramento, so they held the auditions for the West Coast in San Francisco. So we drove to San Francisco. I had my little monologue. I think it was two monologues, like a modern and a Shakespearean. And I thought that my audition was going to be presenting my 2 monologues, and it actually was structured like a class with warm-ups and space objects and improv. And I did not know one single thing that was going on. And I looked around at the sea of people that were auditioning with me, and they all seemed to know exactly what was going on. And I felt totally out of my league.
Yeah.
And I walked out and I said to my mom, there's no way in hell that school would ever take me. I feel like I don't even know what acting is after doing that. And so it was a big surprise to me when I got in. And it was a huge surprise to me just what the training was. I was so out of context to be thinking about college. I didn't even look at what the curriculum was. I didn't know until I got there it was a cut program. They cut the class by I've learned since that they did not have an official number, but it's highly coincidental that they cut the class in half each year. So we started
each year, half each year.
Wow. Well, that's not exactly true. You could only be cut you could be cut after your first and second years. If you made it into third year, then you made it. But I think we started with 100 and we graduated with 22.
Wow.
So, yeah, it wasn't all cut. Some people left because it wasn't for them. They couldn't hack it, whatever, they couldn't afford it. But yeah, it was super. It was just like, I might as well have gone to school in another country because all I did was spend my time at the theater school. I mean, I always had to have a job, so I did that, but I basically did classes all day, rehearsal all night, and performances, 3 times a year. It was very intense.
Wow. You're just a quick, your comment about it's the one brochure you got, like, my head of recruiting here, Kate, hi, Kate. She watches these to pull out, clips if she wants to use, is just gonna jump on that because I'm de-emphasize collateral. I'm like, it's about conversation, it's about relationship. And she's gonna, you see this one brochure, that's all it took.
By the way, I have a podcast that's called I Survived Theater School, and we talk to people who went to theater programs, and I am not alone. Many people have told me that they picked DePaul because they got a brochure. I mean, they probably also got brochures from other places or they auditioned at other places, but in other words, they wouldn't have considered DePaul because it wasn't a very well-known school. It is now, but they wouldn't have considered it had they not received the promotional material. So yes, advertising works as much as it chagrins me to say so.
So you go in, 100 people, you don't know what to expect. That mirrors, I don't think it's a big stretch. It mirrors the experience of some of our students here in the computer science program, the nature of the kind of thing, a lot of folks, they kind of think they know what they're getting into. They have some level of passion for the thing, right? Because they've been either gaming or they're doing some light coding on their own, right? And the nature of the experience is so foreign because it doesn't look like any other type of classroom they've been in, right? We're super, super project-based, collaborative, the thing looks nothing like a classroom. And I'd imagine BFA, you got a similar kind of thing. It looks nothing like high school, right?
Right. It looks nothing like high school because there's no desks for one thing. You spend all of your time up and on your feet. And it was very physical, especially in the first couple of years. In the very first year, you don't do any shows. It's all about breath work and voice work and movement and improv and working on all of these very rudimentary concepts of what it means to bring a creation to the stage. And so you don't start working on an actual production, which is, I mean, the main difference is in high school, it's for many of us, not everybody, but for me, it was only about the productions. It was only about the end goal. It was never about the process to get there.
Right.
And so I think a lot of us found it frustrating at times. Like we just wanted to get a script and we just wanted to do a play.
Right.
But it was smart that they did it that way because we were in a much better position. But yeah, it was not, like I say, after the audition and then in my first weeks at school, I just thought like, what even was I doing before? I never heard of any of this stuff. I never heard of, this whole notion about that your breath is the beginning point for your voice. I mean, it was all very foreign to me,
right.
But exciting too. I mean, I wasn't off put by it. It was exciting.
Sure. Yeah. So when you think back on that, I'm curious, half the class is gone after the first year. To your point, some of them are gone because they're asked to leave. They just couldn't cut it, but some just opt out right after that first year, that second year. What's the kind of, what are the different flavors of Whiplash that had people kind of be like, whoa, no, nope, not doing this?
Yet another thing that I've gotten a better look at since having this podcast and talking to people. Let's see here. Some people were put off by the fact that they were not allowed to pursue anything professionally outside of school. A few people expected to, because it's in Chicago, move to Chicago, do theater school, audition for theater at night, or even try to get an agent, commercial auditions, etc. That was off-putting to some people. Another thing that was off-putting to some people was the professors. How do I say this? A lot of big personalities in theater.
Yep.
Theater school is no exception. For the most part, the professors were people with big personalities. And I graduated in 97. So this is some years ago. I think it's different now, but my sense is that theater at that time was very much in the old guard of this kind of harsh and cult of personality based approach to learning theater, and that it wasn't real unless you were suffering, and it wasn't you weren't inspired unless your teacher was throwing things. It was kind of like that. Yeah. And then some people left because they felt that, and this was a very fair point, that the school wasn't really training them for a career. It was training them to be an actor, which, the logic there is if you are an actor, then you can have an acting career. But I think some people were looking for something much more concrete. Like we had an exit class that was about auditioning, and that was on camera, but the other 3.5 years had nothing to do with getting an agent and getting headshots. And this is how you meet with casting directors. None of that. Everybody had to learn that when they graduated and moved to LA. They had to have their experience with it then. And I think some people who knew that was going to be the end result wanted to have that in the school, and didn't. And some people couldn't afford it, like couldn't keep their scholarship. It's an expensive school. So yeah, those are the flavors.
That middle piece is interesting to me. I think it's a common flaw of technical education, right? And we emphasize the content, but we don't emphasize educating you on how to get people to buy the content from you, as it were, right? Whether it's computer science or acting, or we think our job is just it's an old academic model, right? It's the purpose of academia is to perpetuate academia, not necessarily to go. In fact, if you look back not all that long ago, professors would tell you, and some of them will still tell you in a variety of departments, that preparing you for work isn't my job.
right.
making you an expert in this discipline is, right? And it's just, in some places maybe you can get away with that, but something like acting, where you are in essence a one-person entrepreneur from day one, where there is no infrastructure, there is no place I can apply to for a 9 to 5 version of my gig. I could definitely see how that gets frustrating. It's a big emphasis we put here. You see a lot of schools, over the years, and certainly now, orienting that way in a variety of disciplines. Again, that it's not just good enough to teach you the craft of whatever your thing is, computer science or finance or acting. But we have to help you understand the industry that you're moving yourself into, what success looks like in that industry, how to enter the industry, what to watch out for in the industry across those disciplines. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think my daughter, I think she'd probably say no, but I want to do one of these interviews with her. I've been wanting to for a while. I think she would probably say that she's still not getting enough industry understanding. She's aware enough that she's kind of been, prying some of that loose on her own over the last couple of years. But it's an interesting thing. It's the not teaching someone how to get the thing they love used is, to me, at minimum irresponsible. So anyway, well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, there's one more thing at play there, which is that another thing that was happening sort of like in the larger milieu of theater at that time, there was a real, and there is still to some degree, but much less, this sometimes unacknowledged animosity, but going in only one direction, from theater to the world of film and television. And this mourning for a time when people could be theater actors for a living. When theater was more better compensated because there was more of it, and it was just more part of our cultural landscape. Mm-hmm. So there was some sour grapes, I think, about film and television. And then also this really intense feeling of superiority and a lack of a willingness to admit you are not, even if you're on Broadway, you are not likely, especially when you're starting out, to make anything approaching a living wage doing theater. You must have another job.
Right.
And they would have been wise to say, but good news for you, you can get a job in film and television, acting, something that you love to do, and be very well paid for it.
Right.
So that you can afford to do theater when, at times that you want to do it.
Yeah.
That would have been a huge help.
Yeah. Interesting. We have this kind of, presumption that those who teach, those who kind of hold those kind of stewardship positions are all operating out of, clean intentions, but, they're humans, they got their own baggage. So all right. So you go through this program. I'm assuming you feel good about the preparation you got in the craft, but you're not getting a whole lot of preparation in the industry. Right. So you leave, and it takes you 3 to 6 months to become a Broadway star and then do a couple of films, right? Is that the path, right? That's what.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe you've never heard of me before. I've been all over Broadway. Yeah. So because there was not much in the way of shepherding people post graduation, I just decided to make a life choice that I wanted to make, which was to move back to California. I really missed California. And I moved to San Francisco, which I eschewed LA for reasons that I still don't. I think I do understand it, actually. I eschewed LA because I knew I was not an LA type of girl. I was not going to be cast as an ingenue. And pretty much when you're 21 years old, that's the kind of roles that are available to you. And I knew that was not in the cards for me. So I went to San Francisco, just basically assuming that because it was a city, there was going to be theater there, and that's what I would do. And there is theater there, some, not a lot, and not a lot, and certainly most of it unpaid.
Yeah.
So I became part of a theater company there that is still in existence called Shotgun Players. And And it was great. And I learned a lot, and I started directing there, and I learned a lot about experimental theater, just doing the work. But yeah, it was a life decision to move to California, and I loved it there. I really did love it there, but I had to. That's when the rubber met the road, and I really had to figure out, okay, so what are you going to do with this career? You're not going to do film and TV. You want to do theater, but you moved to this place that doesn't really have very much of it. So, what's going on? And so I did start writing. Then I started realizing that what I needed to do was make my own stuff, create my own opportunities. And I had zero experience with writing. Another thing that I had wished might have been mentioned to me in school is, another thing you could do is look at other disciplines and see what else interests you in this realm. Because I would have been great at all of that stuff too, but that's okay. I learned it when I learned it. I learned it at the time that made sense. Yeah, and so I did that.
So you were writing for stage, not screenplays, right? You were writing stage plays?
Yeah, writing stage plays. Writing, the first thing I did was adapt Salome into a very experimental physical theater piece. Then my husband, who is bilingual, had written a translation of a play by this playwright Virgilio Pinheiro, and we did the English version of this play, also very experimental. And then I started working on trying to adapt the works of Anais Nin. That didn't go too far. It wasn't actually very inherently dramatic. But yeah, and then I started directing, and I got really into the theater that I was really interested in that time was highly physical, highly conceptual. Really, it was performance art. I didn't have that language necessarily at the time, but that's really what it was. I love traditional plays. I adore Pinter and Arthur Miller and people like that. But the thing that I just kept getting drawn to was this original experimental stuff.
Interesting. And so that's all still in San Francisco, yeah. Yeah. So then what I mean, one of the challenges I found in my life, but certainly working with young people over the years and decades at this point, particularly when it's your thing, right? Whether it's again, tech entrepreneur, actor, a lot of overlap. If you're not in an environment that's got ongoing energy around your thing, it is very difficult to do your thing well. So you're in San Francisco, not a big theater scene. You found a little tribe. I'm imagining, you're still having to work kind of side jobs and whatnot. Were you able to keep your kind of engagement in the thing, or did you find it drifting?
Oh, no, I was completely committed to it. I was a waitress, cocktail waitress and a bartender, which, that lended itself just fine to doing theater because I could sort of create my own schedule. No, I really, really believed that I was going to stake my claim as a director in the Bay Area. And I fell in love with somebody who decided to go to medical school, and he did apply to UCSF, but he didn't get into that school. So we had to move to Chicago. Yeah. And at that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a weird thing to be a bartender married to somebody who's going to be a doctor. And also, I just don't think I can have a family in this context. Like I can't, I literally can't physically wait tables, 9 months pregnant. So something's got to change here. And one thing that I have always been interested in is psychology, not interested in it in an academic way, but interested in, the big overlap is human behavior. People who are interested in human behavior. I was the kind of kid who stared at people. People who are interested in human behavior tend to, that interest tends to grow into, wanting to know more about patterns of human behavior and what informs and shapes it. So I went to social work school, and actually it was great. I loved social work school. I loved being a therapist when I became a therapist. And how I had to sell that to myself creatively was, it's not as if I said, oh, I was never meant to be a creative person. It was just, I kind of did this little mental gymnastics where I said, no, but this is creative too. Figuring out how to help people solve their problems is creative. And it's not that that's untrue. It's just, that's not art. It's not the same thing as art. And I was very cut off from my own mourning of doing this artistic life. I just completely disallowed any thoughts about, and I just thought I was done with it. I couldn't even go see plays. I had to really divorce myself from it. And that lasted 13 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and I was depressed and just very dissatisfied with my life, but feeling I had just had this thought like, well, this is what it is. This is why people I went to school with didn't have kids, because you can't, and you chose to have kids, so you don't get to be an artist. That was literally the conversation that I had with myself. And so I almost had to act outside of my own awareness to become back involved with theater. There was a group in my town that was new and had put up a play, and I did not see it. Was not interested in seeing it. But I told myself what I needed to do was volunteer. So I reached out to volunteer with this theater company. And the whole time I'm going, but it's not because I'm going to do theater. It's just because I'm going to like help this theater company because I am suited to help with theater.
Right.
The first minute I was there doing something like, okay, so when can I direct something? When can I act? When can I do this? And I'm still involved with that theater company.
Wow.
It was a good decision.
Yeah. Let's go back to that 13 years though, because I mean, a certain way I have a similar experience, but I also, more broadly for the folks who might be watching, my students or others that are watching, young or old, one of the great things about, there are many horrible things about where the world has evolved to. But there are also many good things, and one of the great things is we have loosened up a bit on, kind of age-based assumptions about when you can start things and when you can not. Right. So not just for the young, for anybody who's kind of starting, or this idea of putting aside a calling that I've had since I was 11, 10. Mm-hmm. And then deciding, well, yeah, it's going to go in a box and I'm going to, be a social worker. I'm going to be a whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. That's some shit. I mean, that's in the moment, it's like, well, this is a practical decision. This is, and all kinds of stories about, well, the creative thing was never, I mean, it's never going to be an actual thing. I mean, if I look at it objectively now, it's great. It's never going to be a thing, right? That line of thinking can come in. The other line of thinking of, well, just practical. I've got a spouse. I got to carry my, kind of parallel weight can come in. The kids can come in. I blame my daughter for anything that didn't go right. It's like, no, it's a joke. But that can kind of get, all kinds of rationalizations in the moment. But when you step back from it, and I'll share my version of it just to not, but before I do, I'd love to just hear, when you step back from it, that's some heavy shit. Mm-hmm. And so now with some distance on it, what are your thoughts about that kind of period of your life, though? The first year of that 13 years, what do you see about it?
I think what occurs to me is the stories that I told other people. I told other people that, some version of what I already said to you. I'm not cut out for film and television. I cannot make a living in theater. It's irresponsible. Frankly, people who are, trying to do this exclusively are irresponsible. It's selfish. It's, I had to like have some type of a moral opposition in a way to it to justify. Um, and then there was a period of time where I thought, oh, well, if you're an artist, you can do any kind of art. So I got into painting, which I still, I like, and it's fine. Painting and drawing. And then it's like, well, but I don't have time really to do that. So, and I have kids, so crafts. I'm going to do crafts. I'm going to be like a great crafter. I'm going to be the craftiest crafter out there. I tried knitting. I just tried doing all of these things that I was telling myself were the same. In the same, if an artist is an artist is an artist. If you're an artist, you can write, you can dance, you can paint, you can draw. I guess what I'm saying is I just lied to myself a lot. And what would happen to me is, I know I said I couldn't see plays. I saw plays occasionally. I would see a play. I'd be like, yeah, let's go see a play. It's fine, and I would get there. And if it was good, I felt rotten. I felt like, fuck, I want to do that. Or sometimes if it wasn't good, like, I should have done that. I could have done such a better job with that. And it just became this thing of like, I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't just appreciate it for what it was, because I was couldn't stop putting myself in that role. And then I would be like really low for weeks after and never able to link, oh, it's because you saw this thing and that's really what you want to do and you're not doing it. So that's why you're low. I never linked those things at all until I got back into theater and went to see a play and had a completely joyous experience of it. And I thought, oh, that's why I, would walk away from having seen something amazing and feel terrible for weeks or even months at times. So it was, listen, I like, if I had to do it all over again, I'm not sure how much I would have done differently. I really did need, like, people don't know this about when you're studying to be a doctor, not only are you not making any money, it costs much money. And we were living in New York City and I needed to make cash fast. I honestly, and we had 2 kids. I couldn't work enough. I mean, it was just, the pressure was really on me to be the breadwinner. So I can't see myself redoing that path much differently. But what I could have done was be honest with myself. And what I could have said, if I do this really well, one day I'm going to be able to do what I want, and just know that it's waiting for me, and I'll only be 40 when it's, time to do it. And then I'll still have quite a few years to do it after that. That would have been a better thing to say to myself than I didn't really ever want this.
Yeah. That's perfect. I love that insight, because what I heard you, initially saying about what you would tell other people. And again, I've got my experiences of it early on, and others I've talked to who've had similar kind of journeys. There's just a self-betrayal that is unnecessary. Candor is possible, where it's like, I'm making this choice and here's why I'm making it. And the self-betrayal that folks do out of just a sense of protection, out of a sense of inability to just address the thing. And it's really problematic, and it can eat up a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes it's a Field of Dreams. You've seen that film.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the doctor?
Kevin Costner.
No. Burt Lancaster.
Oh.
All right, like he Moonlight Graham. I can't believe I remember that. I haven't seen that film in 20 years, but he's he was destined to be this all-star baseball player, and he hung it up to be a country doctor and lived out, and then he steps onto the field and he becomes young again, but he winds up stepping back off, and he's like, I don't have any regrets. Like, I know I could have been a star, but I made the decision actively that I wanted that simpler life, right? Like, that's clean, that's healthy. But most of us, who make those kind of choices don't do that. We don't get guidance to do that, and so it's interesting. I've had some version of that conversation with young people, with students, and otherwise a lot, where it's, I want X, and then there's just all this baggage and story and rationalization around why I can't have X versus just addressing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
guidance is the answer. By the way, I was just reflecting to myself yesterday that it's not that I've never had a mentor, but I've never had what some people describe to me is having a person in their life who had just exactly the career they wanted and who matched them in other sort of demographic ways. And it just felt like a natural thing to slip into that. And then that person would say, well, yeah, you want to have a family, so you're going to have to do this, that, and that. But then when you're this age, you can do that. And as far as I know, I'm the first actor in my family, and definitely the first. I mean, nobody else is an artist really of any. Well, I should take that back. There's a lot of artists, but none of them think that they're artists, and none of them would ever identify themselves in that way. So I had no reference. I had no point of reference to have a family and be an artist.
Interesting. So when we had talked offline, kind of ahead of this conversation, one of the things that came up was this kind of speculation that these kind of choices might be different for a man than for a young man than for a young woman. Coming out of a BFA program or an MFA program, or not even getting formally trained, just diving into a creative life. And then at a certain point in your early 20s, when all of the kind of traditional expectations hit of marriage and family and house and all that, the thinking process that we impose on women might be different than men. And anything you want to kind of poke at on that one?
Yeah, I mean, when I was living in San Francisco, I was actually living in Oakland, but when I was living in the Bay Area at that time, and I was in love, I really didn't consciously spend any time talking to myself about what the path would be. The concept of having a goal and working toward it didn't come to me until like I was 30. So I certainly didn't say to myself, okay, well, if you want to have a family and you want to have a career, this is what you're going to have to do. I did adopt a much more reactionary stance at that point in my life. But that said, when I decided that I did want to have a family, I knew that I knew that I had to have some type of an idea of where things were going to go. And in my experience, even when you're not talking about art, in my experience, men are in a position of thinking in many ways exclusively about their career. And there's this assumption that turns out to be right a lot of the time, that they'll be able to attach their family to it, kind of like dragging them along for the ride, because that's how their father did it.
Right.
And that is certainly true in my relationship. I mean, neither of us ever questioned when he decided that he wanted to be a doctor, but that I would go where he wanted to go when he got to school. I would go where he needed to go when he got residency, and I would just take care of everything else on the side, kind of. And it just occurred to me one day, like, wow, if you're a man, yeah, you have quandaries about like how you're going to do your career and what's going to be the right move. But you don't have to say, do I want to do this or do I want to have a family? Right? I mean, I haven't encountered anybody who said, like in their 20s, yeah, well, I had to think about how it was going to be to have a family to do my career. It just was like, it's just an assumption that the family will attach itself to the man and his career.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So I think you're spot on. And I'm going to be the first man you met where that's not going to be true. I had a similar journey to yours in a different discipline, but creative in general. And actually I had that conversation, just the nature of what I got into. There was a decision point of am I pursuing domestic or am I not? And then it became a long, period of taking care of a lot of domestic shit that preclude and that required a occupational choice that was other to what I would have chosen. And it was an intentional kind of thing in my 20s. Yeah.
Well, and you're right. There are plenty of people who had that experience, but I would push back a little bit just to say one factor that never comes into it for you is physically raising children.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And stepping away from we have just the weirdest relationship with mothers.
Yeah.
And we have the weirdest relationship with women culturally, but with mothers, and I'm not treading any new territory here, but it's still true. It's like the minute you become a mother, you have no other identity.
Right.
People only want to talk to you or think of you, consider you as a mother. And to consider you as anything else, I think that people feel that that's somehow respectful or deferential. And I'm always like, I don't want to talk about being a mother. I have so much more to my identity, and it is so all-consuming when I'm parenting. So that when I'm not parenting, I want to have something else to talk about. And I really felt like, getting pregnant and having to step away from certain things, it's such a physical consideration for women.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
for the most part.
Yeah, and now my daughter's watching us and jumping up and down. Kate was jumping up and down at the brochure thing, and I'm like, because she's very, like Sarah's, in high school, she got into an argument with some of her friends, some of her theater friends, like the boys, because they could not get this following concept that she had clarity on, which was that when I get married, my husband's taking my name, and the kids are going to have my last name. And that second part of it, like the boys could not like one of them said, I think, like, is that legal? Like, you know what I mean? Like, So she's always been like that person. She's like so clear. And this is a living, because she's now early 20s. So this is just about to graduate, having her first play produced. It's a school theater production, but it's a serious theater program, right? So she wrote something and it's being produced right now. And she's like, a little giddy about it, rightfully so.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's great. But she's like literally now months, actually weeks away from in the world as a creative in her 20s, the whole kind of dating. And it's just a matter of, months and years before questions of, 20%, 30%, 60%, 80% of my friends are married, right? Like that progression happens and they're getting houses and they're having children. So this is a very living conversation for her. So big yes to this kind of presumption we have that, once a woman has a child, it's like, this becomes now a one-dimensional being.
By the way, or doesn't have a child. That's a whole other thing that happens to people who never have children. Women have to explain for the rest of their lives why they didn't have children.
Right.
And it's a whole thing. My very best friend made a decision not to have children. And I see her feeling like she is constantly having to, it's like a caveat for her life. I don't have kids, like she has to announce it. She has to come out as a person who doesn't have kids in a way that a man just doesn't.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, and this is not a comparative thing, like they're totally different. And I don't even presume to understand the experience of a woman and that whole kind of expectation, right? I can understand it intellectually at best, but it's not lived experience for me. So I can only have so much understanding for it, but I can see a parallel in kind of social expectations of men around career, where, there's an expectation that once you kind of on a career track, that's who you are. And then your success or failure in that career track is the one-dimensional kind of being that you now are. And some folks lean into that in a healthy way. Some folks lean into that in a dysfunctional way. I think some women lean into the mother thing in a dysfunctional way where they kind of aggressively choose for the one-dimensional kind of identity to not. I wouldn't presume to know why. I understand the male side better, where I could see men who lean into the professional identity as the one-dimensional identity, and it becomes a way to not deal with other things. Becomes a way to get some kind of ego gratification. It's a whole bunch of stuff, right? But there's some kind of parallel.
Yeah, that's
perhaps
true.
not as significant because it's not biological, and so therefore it can't be anywhere close, right? There's a physical expectation for women. I mean, it's a biological, physiological expectation. So I got to imagine that it's a qualitatively deeper thing. Yeah. So, all right, we're near. I try to be when we're in person. These things sometimes go really long, but I find on Zoom, I'm overly respectful of people's times because people have different tolerances. Like I'm a talker. We could do this for 4 hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. So if you'll indulge it, just one last kind of area of questions, and we'll try to wrap in the next few minutes. Yeah,
sure, of course.
Yeah, cool. So, and then this might even be worth a follow-up at some point. So now you're, at a very different stage in your life, picking creative life back up. And at this point now picking it up in a heavy way, like are your kids, grown as it were, like in the sense of they're
no, however you're going to end that sentence. No.
like autonomy. Like when they get to be like 14-ish, even though they're not driving, there's a high level of autonomy. And some kids it's 12 and some kids it's 16. And so,
my oldest is 14, and yeah, I was just saying this the other day. It is so much easier now than it has been for the last 14 years. Cause my youngest is 7. So everybody can go to the bathroom on their own. Everybody can, wipe their own mouth. Everybody can, have some autonomy. But for whatever reason, my particular family situation is such that I'm needed all the time. I mean, just all the time. And so fitting my artistic life in with that has proven very challenging. The only thing I can say is I have gotten extremely adept at it's multitasking, but it's really what it is never missing a moment. Like if I have a free moment, then I can, if it's a truly free moment, then I have to just start writing, or I just have to start working on something, because I don't know when that moment is going to end. And it could end at literally any second. So I've gotten good. I used to feel like this creative process was something, especially writing, I had to have hours of time, and it is nice if you can have hours of time so you can get into your flow state, but I mostly don't have that. So I mostly have to make do with my 30 minutes here and my 45 minutes there. And there's been a reckoning for my family too. Like, oh, suddenly mom has other interests, for their life was the experience of everything was for them. And so they've had to get accustomed to, oh, you're home, but you're writing now. You're home, but you're having a meeting now. You're home, but you're doing something else. And it has been an adjustment. It's been an adjustment for my husband too. But at the end of the day, I feel so proud of this modeling I'm doing of not letting go of something that's really meaningful to you in your vocation or your avocation, because you really aren't doing a service to anybody to be resentful or bitter or sad or unfulfilled. I mean, it just doesn't work. So.
Yeah. That part is, I definitely made that mistake in bursts, and it is problematic, particularly for your kids, right? Where it just kind of carries it carries on the mindset that kind of living the life you want is a burden or something not possible or any of that. And it's useful to model something totally different, even if it's in a quote unquote compromised way, to show that, it's still possible. And then here's how it's possible. Right. So yeah, no, that's actually a good theme to end on. So, Gina Pulice. Did I get that right?
Wonderful. Beautiful.
I've known Gina for like over a year, I think, maybe 2 years. And it occurred to me when we started this, I'd never said her last name before out loud. So there you go. Gina Pulice. I Survived Theater School is the podcast on Apple Podcasts, I'm assuming.
Everywhere you can find podcasts.
Everywhere you can find podcasts. I Survived Theater School. And then you're involved with the theater. Is it Thronestone? Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah,
Thronestone.org.
Yeah, thronestone.org. I auditioned out there. It's where I met Andrea. I think it was Andrea and Mike Boland and there's somebody else. It might have been Jason Peck. There's a third person who auditioned for something, and it went really well. And then a plague hit, and you guys canceled everything. Yeah. I don't know if it went really well. It went well for me. I don't know if it went well for them, but I enjoyed it.
Good.
So but my point is that theater is pretty amazing. I saw one production, and then just the reputation's really spectacular.
Yeah. It's a nice group of people.
Yeah.
And we're doing something this summer. It'll be outdoors, site-specific outdoor theater, roving, like going to three spots, all within walking distance of each other. But yeah,
excellent.
Information about it on thronestone.org.
Thronestone.org. There you go. And I Survived Theater School everywhere you can find podcasts.
That's right.
Thank you, Gina. I really appreciate your time. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it.
All right. And for the rest of you, you know the deal. There's a whole bunch of these online. If you found this interesting, there's 20-ish more on the YouTube channel, a bunch on our Facebook channel. And then if you drive by, we're handing out CDs with CDs. How old am I? Thumb drives with copies of old ones. We'll see you all later.
All right.